When my daughter died, I thought grief was the worst thing I'd ever face. Then her business partner called me 3 days after the burial. I found something in the office safe. You need to come here immediately, and whatever you do, don't bring your son-in-law. I think you might be next. Those words turned my blood cold. What could possibly be in that safe? But when I arrived and saw what she'd hidden there, my hands started shaking. I couldn't breathe. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. I stood in the parking lot of Memorial Gardens, watching the last of the mourners leave. My wife had been gone for 8 years, and now my only daughter, my Emily, was in the ground beside her. 53 years old, healthy, vibrant, dead from what they called a sudden cardiac event during her morning run. Her husband Derek stood near the gate, accepting condolences with practiced grace. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He'd always been polished, always said the right things, but something about the way he kept checking his phone made my skin crawl. A woman approached him, young, maybe 30, blonde hair pulled back tight. They spoke briefly, heads close together, and I saw him slip something into her hand. An envelope. She walked away without looking back. Derek caught my eye and smiled sadly, waved me over. "Dad, why don't you ride back to the house with me? We should talk about arrangements." I shook my head. "I'll drive myself. Need some time alone." The truth was, I couldn't stand being in a car with him. Not now. Not until I understood why Emily had called me 6 days before she died, crying, saying she needed to tell me something important, but Derek was coming home and she had to go. She'd promised to call back. She never did. The house felt wrong without her in it. Derek had insisted I stay in the guest room rather than drive back to my place in Vermont. "I'm here for you, Dad," he'd said, gripping my shoulder. "We're family." But I noticed things, the way his eyes didn't match his words. The phone calls he took in the garage with the door closed. The laptop he carried everywhere, even to the bathroom. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house at high AM, and I heard him talking in the study. His voice was sharp, irritated. "I told you, the insurance takes 6 weeks minimum. Stop pressuring me. We'll have the money by March." I moved away before he caught me listening. The next morning, Patricia Okonkwo called. Emily's business partner of 15 years. They'd built a successful event planning company together, hosting weddings and corporate functions across the Boston area. Patricia's voice was steady but urgent on the phone. "Mr. Harrison, I need you to come to the office. Today. Don't tell Derek." I found an excuse. Told Derek I was meeting an old colleague for lunch. He barely looked up from his phone. "Sure, Dad. Take your time." Patricia's office was in a converted warehouse in Cambridge. She met me at the door, checked the parking lot behind me, then locked us in. "I found this yesterday." She opened the office safe and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Emily hid it in here 3 weeks ago. Told me if anything ever happened to her, I should give it to you. Only you." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, printouts of emails, photos, page after page of evidence that made my stomach turn. Derek had been siphoning money from their joint accounts for over 2 years. Small amounts at first, then larger. The total exceeded ba trombone muy hum. The transfers went to an account under the name V. Mercer. "Who is V. Mercer?" I asked. Patricia pulled up a photo on her phone. That woman at the funeral, the blonde he gave the envelope to, Victoria Mercer. They've been having an affair for 3 years. There was more. Emily had discovered it all. She'd hired a forensic accountant, quietly documented everything, was preparing to confront Derek and file for divorce. She'd written a note, tucked in with the documents. "Dad, if you're reading this, something happened to me. I don't want to sound paranoid, but Derek has been acting strange since I told him I knew about Victoria. He keeps talking about our life insurance policies, keeps pushing me to increase the coverage. I'm scared. I changed the beneficiary on my policy to you last week. He doesn't know yet. Please, if I'm gone, don't let him get away with whatever he did. I love you, Emmy." I read her words 3 times. My little girl, who used to sit on my lap and tell me about her dreams, who called me every Sunday without fail, who'd been afraid, alone, and hadn't told me how bad it was. Patricia was crying. I should have done something. She told me she was worried, but I thought she was just stressed about the divorce. I didn't think he'd actually. I looked at the date on Emily's note. January 10th. She died January 11th. I drove to Boston Police Department headquarters that afternoon, asked to speak with whoever handled Emily's case. They sent me to Detective Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed woman who listened without interrupting as I spread Emily's folder across her desk. Mr. Harrison, she said carefully, I understand your suspicion, but your daughter's death was ruled natural causes. Cardiac arrhythmia. The medical examiner found no signs of foul play. She was healthy, ran marathons, had a physical 3 months ago with a clean bill of health. Santos nodded slowly. That does happen sometimes. Hidden heart conditions that don't show up until my daughter was murdered. I know it. This folder proves motive. She was about to expose him, divorce him, take everything. He killed her. Santos studied the documents again. This shows financial fraud and infidelity. That's significant, but it doesn't prove murder. Without evidence of how he might have caused her death. She spread her hands. My hands are tied. I left the precinct knowing I was on my own. 42 years as an electrical engineer, the last 15 specializing in forensic analysis of accidents. I'd testified in court dozens of times, helped determine whether equipment failures were accidents or sabotage. I knew how to investigate. I knew how to find the truth. I just needed time and access. For the next week, I played the grieving father perfectly. Let Derek comfort me. Accepted his offers of tea and sympathy. Asked his advice about handling Emily's affairs. On the third day, I mentioned needing help sorting through Emily's belongings. Derek jumped at the opportunity. Of course, Dad, whatever you need. But his helpfulness was selective. He steered me away from her home office, from the filing cabinet in the basement, from anything that might contain more evidence. I waited, watched, documented. Derek's pattern became clear. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he left the house for 3 hours. Gym, he said. But the gym was 15 minutes away, and he came back without breaking a sweat. On the second Thursday, I followed him. He drove to a condo complex in Brookline. I parked across the street and watched him enter Unit Ba Chumle Bon. Victoria Mercer opened the door. They kissed before the door closed. I photographed everything with the camera I'd bought specifically for this purpose. Dates, times, license plates, every detail. That evening, Derek made dinner. He seemed relaxed, almost cheerful. Actually whistled while he cooked. The audacity of it made me want to scream. But I smiled, thanked him for the meal, asked about his day. I've been thinking, Dad. He refilled my wine glass. This house is too big for me alone. Maybe I should sell it, start fresh somewhere. That seemed sudden. Emily always wanted to travel. Maybe I'll honor her memory by seeing the world. His smile was wide, sincere-looking. Life's short, right? I nodded, thinking about the insurance payout he was expecting, thinking about Victoria and their plans, thinking about my daughter's last terrified days. After he went to bed, I searched the house. In his nightstand, I found a burner phone. The contacts showed only one number, labeled V. The text messages made my vision blur with rage. December 11th, insurance increased. Hi fi numuyam now. We're set. January hand. She's getting suspicious. Moving up timeline. January 8th. Package arrived. Ready for Thursday. January 11th. It's done. Act sad. I photographed every message, then put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Package. What package? The next morning, I told Derek I was going back to Vermont for a few days. Needed to check on my house, pay some bills. He offered to drive me to the airport. Actually, I said, I'm going to rent a car. Take the scenic route. Clear my head. He hugged me at the door. Take care of yourself, Dad. We'll get through this together. I drove away, circled back after his car left, and let myself in with the spare key I'd copied days earlier. The basement was first. Emily's filing cabinet had been cleaned out, but Derek wasn't as thorough as he thought. Behind it, wedged against the wall, I found a receipt. Pharmacy, dated January 10th. The purchase, Dugoxin, A heart medication that, in high doses, could cause fatal cardiac arrhythmia. My engineer's mind connected the pieces. Derek had poisoned my daughter, fed her digitalis in small doses or one massive one, made her heart stop, made it look natural. But I needed more. Evidence that would hold up in court, not just convince a grieving father. I hired a private investigator that afternoon. Michael Torres, former FBI, came highly recommended, showed him everything I had. He studied the documents, the photos, the pharmacy receipt, his expression growing darker by the minute. This is premeditated murder, Mr. Harrison. He's careful, but not careful enough. What do I need? Direct evidence of how he administered the poison. Testimony or documentation linking him to the digoxin in your daughter's system. Torres leaned forward. Did they do a toxicology screen during the autopsy? I didn't know. I called Patricia, who called the medical examiner's office. Standard panels only. They hadn't tested for cardiac glycosides, because there was no reason to suspect them. Torres nodded grimly. We need to request an expanded toxicology. If there's any tissue preserved. There was. Emily had been an organ donor, but certain samples were retained. Torres knew a forensic pathologist who could run the tests privately, legally, with my authorization as next of kin. While we waited for results, Torres surveilled Derek and Victoria. His reports came daily, detailed, damning. They met constantly, discussed their plans, talked about how they'd wait a decent interval, then announced their relationship. They even looked at real estate in Florida. The insurance money's coming through next week, Derek said in a conversation Torres recorded through a parabolic microphone. $2.5 million. We're free. Victoria's response. Finally, I've been waiting 3 years for this. She knew. She was part of it. The toxicology results arrived on February barred. Positive for elevated digoxin metabolites. Concentration consistent with acute poisoning, not therapeutic use. Emily had never been prescribed heart medication. I sat in my rental apartment, reading the report, and I wept, not just from grief, but from the cold certainty of what my daughter had suffered. Someone she trusted, someone she'd built a life with, had poisoned her in her own home. Torres arranged a meeting with Detective Santos. This time, I brought everything. The bank records, the text messages, the surveillance footage, the pharmacy receipt, and most importantly, the toxicology report. Santos read each document carefully. Her face changed as the evidence accumulated. When she reached the text messages, she looked up. January muy bon. It's done. This is the day of your daughter's death. Yes, Santos closed the folder. Mr. Harrison, I'm reopening this case as a homicide investigation. I need to keep all of this as evidence. Will you arrest him? Soon. But we need to do this right. Build an airtight case. She met my eyes. Your daughter deserves justice done properly. I agreed to keep silent, to maintain my cover as the oblivious, grieving father. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. 2 weeks later, I was back at Derek's house for what he thought was dinner and estate discussion. The real purpose was allowing police to execute a search warrant while he was occupied. Derek had made lamb, Emily's favorite. The irony made me sick. So, Dad, he said, pouring wine, I wanted to talk about Emily's business. Patricia's offered to buy out her share. Good money, enough to set you up comfortably. I pretended to consider it. That's generous. How much? He named a figure. My poker face held. What's really happening, I realized, was that Derek was trying to liquidate everything quickly. He wanted the insurance, the business sale, probably the house too. Then he'd vanish with Victoria before anyone asked too many questions. At bay, Muilam. His phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, excused himself. I heard his voice rise from the other room. What do you mean, police at my office? What are they looking for? He came back ashen. Dad, I have to go. Emergency at work. Can we continue this tomorrow? Of course. Everything. Okay? Fine. Just paperwork issues. He left in such a hurry he forgot his coat. Torres called me an hour later. They found the digoxin at his office, hidden in a vitamin bottle in his desk. plus emails on his work computer to Victoria, discussing the plan they're arresting him tonight. I stood in my dead daughter's house, surrounded by her photos, her books, the life she'd built that her husband had destroyed for money. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief. March 9th. I sat in the courtroom gallery as Derek was brought in, handcuffed, wearing an orange jumpsuit. The polished businessman was gone. He looked gaunt, desperate, aged 20 years in 3 weeks. The charges were read: first-degree murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. Derek pleaded not guilty, in a voice that shook. Victoria had been arrested 2 days earlier, caught trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with Mocham Tamui Khoman cash. Money Derek had transferred before his arrest. She'd crumbled immediately, offered to testify against him, in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day. The prosecution built their case methodically. The pharmacy receipt showing Derek purchased digoxin, using a fake name but caught on security cameras. The text messages discussing timeline and package. Victoria's tearful testimony about how Derek had planned the murder for months, researched untraceable poisons, waited for the insurance increase. Emily's note was read aloud. Her fear, her love, her desperate hope that I would find the truth. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Derek's defense tried to blame Victoria, painting her as the mastermind. Derek, as a naive man, led astray by a manipulative woman. But the evidence was overwhelming. The digoxin was in his office. The pharmacy cameras showed his face. The text messages were on his phone. His ex-wife testified. His first wife, the one I'd never met, never even knew existed. Derek had divorced her after she discovered him embezzling from their joint business. The pattern of behavior was clear. On March Heimly barred, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty. Insurance fraud. Derek collapsed. Had to be helped to his feet by his attorney. As they led him away, he looked at me for the first time since the trial began. His face twisted with something like hatred. Sentencing came 2 months later. Life without parole for Derek. 15 years for Victoria, who would be 45 when she got out. The judge addressed Derek before pronouncing sentence. You murdered a woman who loved you, who built a life with you, for money. You showed no mercy to Emily Harrison. This court shows you none. Derek had nothing to say, just stood there, hollow, as his entire future collapsed into a prison cell. Afterward, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot for a long time. Reporters had wanted statements. I'd given them nothing. There was nothing to say that would matter to anyone but me. I drove to the cemetery, knelt beside Emily's grave, next to her mother's. I kept my promise, sweetheart. I found out what he did. He's going to prison forever. He won't hurt anyone else. The wind moved through the trees. Birds sang somewhere nearby. Life continuing despite everything. I miss you every day. Your mother would have been so proud of the woman you became, the business you built, the way you faced the truth even when you were afraid. I touched her headstone, traced her name with my finger. I love you, Emmy. Always will. The insurance company had voided Derek's claim the moment charges were filed. He received nothing. Victoria received nothing. Everything Emily had worked for, the business, the house, her savings, went into a charitable trust supporting women escaping domestic violence. It's what she would have wanted. Patricia runs the foundation now. She calls me every few weeks, tells me about the families they've helped, single mothers starting over, young women finding safety. Emily's legacy, better than any inheritance. I moved back to Vermont full-time. Sold my consulting business. At 73, I finally retired. But I didn't stop working entirely. Detective Santos connected me with families in similar situations. People who suspected their loved ones' deaths weren't accidents, but couldn't get authorities to listen. I've helped 4 families so far. Guided them through investigations, connected them with resources, showed them how to document evidence the way I learned to. 3 resulted in arrests. The 4th is ongoing. My wife, Margaret, used to say, I was stubborn, that once I decided something mattered, nothing could stop me. She was right. Emily's death could have destroyed me. Instead, it gave me purpose. The justice system isn't perfect. It's slow and bureaucratic and sometimes fails entirely. But when you give it the right evidence, when you force it to see what's really there, it works. Derek will die in prison. Victoria will emerge middle-aged, broke, her beauty faded, her reputation destroyed. Neither of them will ever benefit from what they did to my daughter. That's not revenge. That's accountability. Last week, I got a letter from a woman in Ohio whose husband is serving life for killing their son. She'd seen a news story about Emily's case, recognized the pattern, finally found the courage to tell police what she'd suspected for years. They're reopening her son's death as a homicide. I wrote back, told her I was sorry for her loss, told her she was brave, told her that finding the truth wouldn't bring her son back, but it would mean his death mattered, that evil had consequences, that she wasn't crazy for knowing something was wrong. That's what Emily would have wanted. Not just justice for herself, but protection for others. Tonight, I sit on my porch in Vermont, watching the sun set over mountains that have stood for millions of years. I think about Emily as a child, laughing while catching fireflies in this same yard. I think about Margaret, who loved this view, who would have been devastated by what happened to our girl. I think about how close Derek came to getting away with it. If Patricia hadn't found that folder, if Emily hadn't been smart enough to document everything, if I'd been too old, too grief-stricken, too trusting to investigate. But she was smart, and I wasn't too anything. And Derek is spending the rest of his life in a cell because he underestimated both of us. The grief doesn't go away. It's always there, a hollow place where Emily used to be. But alongside it now is something else. Not satisfaction exactly, not peace. Something quieter than that. Justice served, truth uncovered, a father's promise kept. Emily, wherever you are, I hope you know. I hope you know I never stopped fighting. I hope you know that everything you feared would be buried came into the light instead. I hope you know your father loved you enough to tear apart the comfortable lie and expose the ugly truth beneath. That's what fathers do. We protect our children, even after we've lost them. We carry their memory forward. We make sure their lives mattered. And yours did, sweetheart. Yours mattered more than I can ever say. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear another story, click on the video appearing on your screen now. Thank you for watching.